Welcome to the Explainer. You ever wonder what makes one game feel absolutely incredible to play while another one just feels, well, off? It's not magic. It's what you might call the invisible art of user experience. Today, we're going to break down the design fundamentals that really separate the masterpieces from the frustrating messes. So, what makes a game feel good to play? It's such a simple question, right? But the answer is surprisingly deep. It's that satisfying click, that perfect jump, that menu that just makes sense. Every gamer knows the feeling instantly. But for a game designer, creating that feeling isn't magic at all. It's literally their entire job. And it all comes down to mastering the user experience. So here's our game plan for today. We're going to start inside the player's mind to really understand their experience. Then we'll get into the golden rules that designers basically live by. We'll see the game world through their eyes, decode the feedback we get from sights and sounds, talk about bridging the gap between our hands and the controller, and finally explore why great design means designing for everyone. All right, let's dive right in with the most fundamental concept of all, the player's experience. I want you to think about this. The real game isn't what's happening on your screen. That's just light and sound. The real game, well, that's the one taking place inside your head. And this brings us to a really critical distinction, UI versus UX. The user interface, the UI, is all the stuff you actually see and touch. You know, the menus, the health bar, the button layout on the controller. But the user experience, the UX, is how all of that makes you feel. The UI is the paintbrush. The UX is the masterpiece that gets created inside the player's mind. You know, this quote from our source material just says it all. The experience is something that happens inside the player's head. And what that really means is that every single design choice, every font, every sound effect, everything has to answer one simple question. How does this make the player feel? Okay, so now that we've got that player-first philosophy down, let's look at the golden rules of design. You can kind of think of this as the designer's essential code. These are the guiding principles that prevent frustration and really pave the way for smooth, enjoyable gameplay. Now, this first rule, it might sound a little counterintuitive. Do not innovate unnecessarily in UI design. You might be thinking, wait, isn't innovation a good thing? Well, yeah, but here's the thing. Players come to games with years and years of built-up muscle memory. If the jump button has been X in a dozen similar games, changing it just to be different creates a totally needless barrier, and that leads directly to frustration. You can see how all of these principles are really about one thing, removing friction. You got to be consistent so players don't have to relearn everything from scratch. Give instant feedback so actions feel impactful and real. Keep the player feeling like they're in control, and always, always let them undo mistakes easily. The whole goal is to make the interface so smooth that it becomes invisible, just letting the player focus on having fun. Okay, let's build on that foundation and start looking at the actual architecture of the game. Section 3, Through the Player's Eyes. This covers two of the absolute biggest design choices. The camera, which is how you see the world, and the interaction model, which is how you act within it. First step, perspective. If you go with a first-person view, you get this incredible immersion, right? You are the character. And it's also fantastic for aiming. The trade-offs, though, are that you can't see your awesome custom avatar, and for some people, it can induce motion sickness. On the flip side, a third-person view is much more cinematic. You get to see and customize your character, but it requires a way more complex camera system that can, sometimes get stuck behind a wall and block your view. And then you have the interaction model, which is all about defining the scope of your power. Are you an avatar, like Mario, where you're directly influencing just your immediate surroundings? Or are you multi-present, kind of like a chess master, commanding units all across the board? This choice fundamentally defines your role. Are you an actor in the world, or are you a god acting on it? Okay, so we've got our camera set up, we know our interaction model. Now it's time to populate that framework with all the tangible feedback players need to understand what's actually happening in the game. Welcome to Section 4, the sights and sounds. The whole point of a head-up display, or HUD, is actually pretty simple. Deliver critical information at a glance, without forcing the player to stop what they're doing and think about it. Is my health low? How much ammo do I have left? A good UI answers these questions instantly, which lets the player stay immersed in the action, not get lost in the data. But what's really fascinating here is the psychology behind which indicator you choose. As you can see, digits are precise. They're unambiguous, perfect for a score or an ammo count. But for something more emotional, like your health, that shrinking red power bar is something you understand instantly. You feel it. The needle on a gauge feels mechanical, so it's perfect for a car's engine. It's all about matching the visual language to the kind of information you're trying to convey. Okay, next up, let's talk about bridging the physical gap. This section is all about that literal connection between the player's hands and the actions happening in the game world. We're talking controls, navigation, and the input devices that make it all happen. It's interesting, in a lot of games, giving an order follows this super logical, almost sentence-like pattern. Step 1, you designate the unit, who is doing the thing. Step 2, you give the order, what is the thing they're doing. And step 3, you select the target, to what or whom are they doing it. It's just a simple, intuitive sequence that really mirrors how we think and communicate in real life. Now, when it comes to just moving your character around, designers have this really fundamental choice to make: screen-oriented versus avatar-oriented steering. With screen-oriented, pushing up on the stick always moves the character toward the top of the screen. With avatar-oriented, up moves them in whatever direction they're currently facing. Neither one is inherently better, but this choice totally defines the player's mental model of movement, and whatever you choose, it has to be absolutely consistent. All right, and for our final section, let's talk about something that's absolutely crucial: designing for all players. This is about two really big ideas: how designers manage the ever-increasing complexity of games, and how they make sure those games can be enjoyed by the widest possible audience. You see, great designers have these two really powerful tools they use to handle complexity. The first is abstraction, which is just a fancy word for removing a feature. For example, most racing games don't have a fuel gauge because managing fuel just isn't the core fun part of the game. The other tool is automation, which is letting the computer handle a complex task for you, like automatic gear shifting. This isn't about dumbing a game down. It's a very deliberate choice to focus the player's attention on what's most engaging. And this is exactly why accessibility isn't just some nice-to-have feature. It's fundamental. Take a common form of colorblindness. It affects about 6% of men. That means, statistically, about 1 in every 16 male players might have it. So if your game relies on telling red from green to know who's a friend and who's a foe, well, you've just made your game incredibly frustrating, if not unplayable, for a huge chunk of your audience. Great design has to consider everyone. So, what's the takeaway here? From the way a camera smoothly follows your character to that little subtle click a menu button makes, none of it is an accident. Every single element of the user experience is a deliberate choice made by a designer, and now you have the vocabulary to see them. So the next time you pick up a controller, what invisible design choice are you going to notice first?